In succession, Cherry Jones plays Nan Pierce, the formidable, tough-as-nails head of a rival media giant matriarch of the Pierce family. I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Golddoobie. I'm here with two-time Tony and two-time Emmy winner, Cherry Jones. Cherry, first of all, congratulations on your latest Emmy nomination. Talk us through the morning of. How exciting was it?
Well, you know, I honestly always forget when the nominations are. Like I'll read it, and then a month later I have forgotten the day, and so I just don't think about it because I never think I'm going to get nominated. But my wife did know the date, and so when I woke up that morning, and because we are in her hometown of Bern, Switzerland now, she had set up we don't have a TV, but we have a beamer, you know, one of those projectors. So she'd gotten her computer all hooked up and projected it on the wall. And I thought, it's awfully early to be watching a movie. And then she reminded me what the day was. And she had a cold bottle of champagne in the refrigerator. It wasn't quite as early here in Switzerland as it was in LA. So we weren't drinking it at 7 in the morning or whatever, but we were drinking it, I don't know what time it was, 1:30 or something. And we just had this wonderful little celebratory lunch.
That's nice.
And it was lovely. And you know, that Succession, oh my gosh. I had, when I got the call that they, you know, were interested in me for this part, I had never watched it because I'm bad about watching television and film. I'm the worst.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in the theater and worked at night, so I never had the luxury of going to the movies, and I didn't want to go into a darkened theater by day when I was going to be in a darkened theater at night.
Yeah.
So I just didn't watch that much, and I'm trying to turn that around now and take in great films with Sophie on the beamer. But yes, yeah. So but anyway, all of this is to say that I had not watched Succession that first season when I got the call, and I ended up, because I was on my way to Europe, and I ended up watching it, the first couple of episodes on the plane, but then of course I couldn't get it in Europe. So then I watched the next few episodes on the plane home, and you know, I was just hooked at 40,000 feet, you know, by those characters. And then to see where those writers took it in the second season. I mean, when has there been a second season that has been that skyrocketingly stronger than that incredibly strong first season?
Yeah, like it was sublime. And then for me, and that's just my opinion, but I think Turnhaven episode 5 was the perfect episode. And
well,
I just loved it. And you're in it.
There are a lot of perfect episodes on that show. I couldn't pick if I had to. I mean, or the shots, or just the individual scenes. I mean, each single scene and character is just a feast. And but that Turnhaven, I think for all of them was for the family, for the Roy family, was a great deal of fun because, you know, it was family against family, and we all a lot of us knew each other because a lot of my family members, the Pierce members, were people that I'd come up with in the theater.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit like Old Home Week. Jace with Cameron, and Holly Hunter and I went to college together, and I'd known Mark Lynn Baker forever, and Peter Friedman, and Jeremy Stamos I'd known. Jeremy had everyone in hysterics because there was so much ad-libbing in all those big group scenes. Yeah. And he had that end of the table, that dinner scene. He had everyone at that end of the table in hysterics because we ad-libbed through everyone's close-up.
Yeah.
When they would zero in on 2 or 3 characters talking. the rest of us were carrying on these completely in character.
You must have been hysterical. That sounds like so much fun.
Oh my gosh, they would finally yell cut, and one end of the table would just finally just absolutely practically roll on the floor, because usually it was Jeremy Stamos who said something so funny. But Jeremy Strong, to my left, had come up with this whole backstory to woo Nan Pierce. He suddenly starts asking me all of these questions about the sculptures in the garden and the paintings on the wall. And, he says, was I mistaken, or is that really a sergeant in the front, in the foyer of that? And I said at one point that I was surprised that he was so knowledgeable. And then he starts talking about the fact that his mother, who's English, was on the board at the Tate, so that they'd spent a great deal of time as children at the Tate and the Tate Modern, and
He's such a deep thinker, that Jeremy Strong. He's a real thinker.
Oh my gosh, Incredible. He does not stop.
He does not stop. It's really interesting, because as soon as the scene where the two families are kind of like there on the hillside at the compound, like we could just see the fireworks are about to begin, and maybe the bloodshed between the patriarch and the matriarch, because finally Logan Roy has met his match, so to speak. And I'm wondering how much fun it was to go toe to toe with Brian Cox, an actor of that caliber.
Brian and I had never met before.
Really?
And no, I will say it was a little bit of love at first sight. Because he is such a great man of the theater. He taught theater in Moscow. His life story. In fact, while we were shooting the what's it called, Argus, the sort of Davos, the next episode, it was my last day there, and I was coming down to breakfast in this. We stayed in that big lodge place up in the Adirondacks. Gosh, it was so much fun, because they do love, it was drinks after every day when people didn't have it, just sitting around, remembering the old times and getting to know those young, like Sarah is what, and she really is like the girl next door. Yeah. She's just, anyway, what was my point? Oh, I came down to breakfast and I ran into Brian, and he said, I just had the most extraordinary phone call. And I said, what? And he looked radiant. And I said, what is it? He said, I've just gotten a call from my agent that Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to read Churchill's famous, we will defeat them on the beaches, we will defeat them in the air. I'm badly paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But for D-Day,
wow.
For the celebrations of D-Day. And so he was like a little boy. He was so thrilled. And, but to be with a group of actors and who are, span those generations of experience, and to have Brian as the great lion of the family you feel that dynamic, sitting on our chairs while they're lighting. You feel that dynamic in the room, that everyone ultimately defers to Brian.
Yeah, but Nan was such a presence. I didn't realize it was only 2 episodes. For me, it felt like your character she really made an impact on the whole season as a whole.
You're susceptible to old wasps.
It must be. There's obviously some pathology there that we'll have to just explore another time. But yeah. I found the scenes between you and Holly really compelling. But I must say, I know people have brought this up with you before, but I really can't ignore it. The scene that to me is so key is where Rosa, the cook, and I know you know where I'm going with this. She's arranging this huge dinner, and in all of Nan's liberal, benevolent glory, she asks her to have a drink, and was it virtue signaling, or are people like her simply not self-aware?
Was it, say that again, was it?
Was it virtue signaling? Was she trying to signal that she's a really good person, or is it she just has no idea what she's doing? What do you think?
Well, I think it was obviously a little bit of, I think it was a little bit of both. But certainly the way it's done and the timing of it certainly seems like, aren't I a noble pilgrim?
Yeah.
You know, and and it was just, Gabriella. I think Rose's name. She was an amazing woman. She's a dancer, but it was excruciating to have to say that line and do it in a way that because just that. And she was so great when she says, I have to get the dinner ready, that I'm completely oblivious to what's going on in the kitchen. But it was Frank Rich was, I think, my great champion for this part, which, having grown up in the theater when Frank was still the theater critic at the New York Times, it just thrilled me that Frank Rich had been my champion for this, and I really adore him. We've gotten to spend a little time over the last few years, fleeting time together, and I really adore him. But when I spoke to him, he wrote me a long letter about everyone involved and how extraordinary they are. And I wrote back and I said, I know that this character must imagine herself a Katharine Graham of the Washington Post. But she's not, is she? And Frank, knowing that I'm an old broad from the theater, said, no, she's a bus and truck Katharine Graham. Because, at the end of the day, it's a whole new world than the world that Katharine Graham operated in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And aren't you just fascinated to see where season 3 goes?
Oh, I know. So when everyone can get back to work, I'm hoping that they bring you back. I know you didn't want to leave the set. I know J. Smith Cameron has to send you texts about what's going on because they traveled to Croatia and God knows where else. I hope you come back. We want to see more Nan.
Well, I hope I do too.
Yeah.
But, old Logan Roy's got to have some old bullheaded wasp in his face occasionally.
I think so. I think absolutely. Last year you won the Emmy for Handmaid's Tale, right? And I remember backstage you said, you, as usual, you always do this, Jerry. You mentioned that the people in your category, how much you respect them, particularly Cicely Tyson, Felicia Rashad. It's so funny that the three of you are back in the category again this year, along with amazing talent like Laverne Cox and your castmates, Alexis Bledel and Dame Harriet Walter. Like, does it ever get old?
Yeah, well, not when you see that list. It makes you very relaxed when you see that list. I've always said there's only two ways to go to award shows: knowing you're going to win or knowing you're going to lose. And the in-between part is not fun. But this time I can sit at home and relax. And because I don't see enough television and film, I had not seen Felicia or Cicely in their roles. But the very idea that they were both nominated, not one of them took away the prize, to me was absurd, because I know them from their theater work. So that was what that was about. I don't know how you ever see Miss Tyson in anything and not just clear the red carpet for her. She's such a goddess.
Incredible.
The autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman was the first time I recognized that was extraordinary acting. I'd never seen anything like that, except when I was about 13 or 14, Maureen Stapleton in Airport.
Yeah.
no one is going to get that reference, but she's watching her husband roll away through a blizzard down the runway, and he's left her, and she's despondent. And I remember I was 13 looking at the movie screen and thinking, that's just the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. And that's how I felt about Miss Tyson in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And if people have not seen that, they really, really need to.
Isn't it amazing how performances can have such an impact on you as you're growing up or as you're working? And it reminds me that you did a similar thing when you won your second Tony for Doubt. And in that category, you had Laura Linney, Mary Louise Parker, Felicia Rashad again, and Kathleen Turner. And of course, you went up there. It was a beautiful speech, and you called out Kathleen Turner for her work. And I just love that camaraderie, that especially in the theatre, but also amongst your colleagues and comrades on TV. What's that all about? Is that important to you that you call out other performers when you won an award?
Well, yes, it's the only time you have the floor.
Yeah.
So you might as well make use of it, of getting to call out and honor those you greatly respect. And I think Kathleen and I think our two shows were about the only two shows that were still running for the Tonys that year. And I had gotten to see her show, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, opening night, because Doubt was running right across the street, and Virginia Woolf was almost 3 hours, and we were only 90 minutes.
Perfect.
So we got dressed, ran across the street, and got to be there for opening night. So,
wow, it's amazing.
It was thrilling.
Well, I have a final question, and I'm going to try to put this as succinctly as I can. But I find a lot of your characters really compelling. Like, often they're really intentional, direct, formidable, astute. But you tend to imbue them with this warmth and authenticity that I get from you now, just speaking to you personally. But I wonder, are you drawn to those tough, ardent, straight shooters? Is that something that you love playing? Because a lot of your characters are like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think because I grew up playing heroines in the theater, at the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I played, Rosalind and Viola and Rosaura in Life is a Dream. I played all these, Grusha and Caucasian Chalk Circle, all these very strong women. And I know part of the reason why I got cast as Sister Aloysius in Doubt was because Doug Hughes semi-joked about my innate sense of righteousness. It takes a little righteousness to play some of these women, but if you're just self-righteous, it's not as interesting as if there's a human being underneath that granite monolith of self-righteous. So, and I always say, my mother was a remarkable woman and a brilliant high school English and American lit teacher. And she had great presence and nobility and was intrinsically enlightened somehow. And so I always just think, what would Mama do? What would Mama do with this part? And wow. So basically, I honestly just play Mama the way I think Mama would play a part.
That's so interesting because my follow-up was going to be, it can be such a fine line to make those characters, they could become quite malignant or intimidating, but for some reason you always are one step behind that, going over that precipice. And I guess maybe it's because you're saying to yourself, what would Mama do? So yeah,
there were only a couple of parts that I played where Mama couldn't help me out at all because they were just, irredeemable. Yeah,
exactly. But that mixes it up a bit. At least it keeps it interesting. So
exactly,
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, everybody that's watching this, go to Gold Derby, make your predictions, click subscribe, and we've got lots of contender chats just like this one with Cherry. And Cherry, we thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Rob, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. We all have some time on our hands.
We sure do.